am going to tell you something that still makes my hands shake when I think about it. Not because of the money, not because of the house, but because of what it revealed about the people I once trusted more than anyone. You grow up believing family is your safe place, your circle, the people who stand between you and the world. Then one day you wake up and realize they were the ones quietly cutting the floor out from under you while you were still trying to stand up from a loss. That is what happened to me. And if you have ever felt betrayed by your own blood, you are going to understand every single word I say. My name is Emily Parker. I am 38 years old. I live in the United States, and I am talking to you as a daughter who loved her father deeply, and as a woman who learned that sometimes the people sitting at the same table as you are not on your side at all. This is the story of how my own family sold my inheritance behind my back. And how one quiet message from the bank would become the first crack in their perfect little plan. Growing up, my dad, Robert, was my anchor. He was one of those old-school men who believed in hard work, handshakes, and keeping your word. He was not rich, not in the way people post about online, but he built a solid life. He worked at the same manufacturing plant for almost 35 years, bought a modest house with a big yard, paid it off slowly, and treated that place like his castle. That house was where we celebrated every birthday, every Thanksgiving, every little accomplishment. That house smelled like coffee in the morning and fried chicken on Sundays. It was not just bricks and wood. It was our story. I am the youngest of 3. My older brother Mark is 10 years older than me. My sister Karen is 6 years older. They were closer in age, and growing up, they bonded over things I did not always understand. Mark was always chasing something bigger, some deal, some scheme. He loved to talk about making it big and not living small like Dad. Karen, on the other hand, wanted appearances. She liked nice things, nice clothes, fancy dinners. And talking about who had what. Where Dad saw stability, they saw limitation. It did not really show as a problem when we were kids. It came out in little ways. Mark borrowing money and forgetting to pay it back. Karen borrowing clothes and never returning them. Dad used to laugh and say, "They are just figuring themselves out, Em." But even back then, I noticed something. Whenever there was something to be gained, they somehow ended up at the front of the line. And whenever there was something hard to do, they always somehow disappeared. Fast forward many years. Life happened. I got married, then divorced. I found my own little apartment and worked in a small office job, nothing glamorous, but it paid the bills and kept me independent. Mark jumped from one business idea to another. Some worked for a while, most did not. Karen married a man with a decent income, but they always spent more than they made, always chasing the next upgrade. And through all of it, Dad stayed in that same house, with the same old truck in the driveway, mowing his own lawn, drinking his evening coffee on the porch. As Dad got older, his health started to slip. Nothing dramatic at first, just little things. A bad knee. A cough that stayed too long. Tiredness he brushed off with jokes. I took him to appointments, helped him organize his pills, sat with him in the waiting room while he pretended not to be nervous. Mark and Karen visited, but their visits always had a topic. They asked him if he had thought about what would happen to the house. They brought up being practical and not leaving things messy. I did not like those conversations. Dad would squeeze my hand and change the subject. One evening, a year before he died, Dad called me into his bedroom. He had a small metal box on his dresser, the same one he had since I was a kid. I remember it because he used to keep old baseball cards and cufflinks in it. That night, he opened it and took out a folder. "Em," he said, "you know I am not going to be around forever." I felt my throat close. "Dad, please, not this." He gave me that look, the one that said he was serious. "Listen. I worked my whole life. For what little I have. The house, the savings, what is left in the retirement accounts. I talked to a lawyer. There is a will. Everything is split between you 3, but there are some specifics. I want you to know I tried to be fair. I did not want to talk about money. I wanted to talk about him living longer. But he insisted. He opened the folder and showed me some of the papers. I did not read the fine print, I just remember seeing my name, Mark's, and Karen's. I remember his finger tapping the page where my name was listed next to the house. I put some protections in place, he said quietly. I know your brother and sister. I love them, but I know them. The house cannot be sold without all 3 signatures. You hear me? All 3. That means you have a say. You are not to be pushed aside. I nodded, not fully understanding then how important those words would become. Okay, I said, if that is what you want. That is what I want, he replied. I trust you, Emily. You have a good heart. But promise me one thing. Do not let anyone tell you that your voice does not matter when I am gone. Not your brother. Not your sister. No one. I promised. At the time it felt like a small promise. Later it would feel like a lifeline. When Dad passed away 6 months later, the grief hit me like a wave. Even as an adult, there was a part of me that still felt like his little girl. Losing him made the world feel suddenly empty, like someone had turned the volume down on everything. His house felt different without him, too quiet and too large. The chair he always sat in looked abandoned. His coffee mug sat on the counter, like he had just stepped out and forgotten to come back. The days after the funeral were a blur of casseroles, condolences, and paperwork. Mark took over talking to the funeral home. Karen handled the flowers and church announcements. I stayed close to Dad's things, trying to organize his clothes, his papers, his photos. It was my way of saying goodbye slowly. The estate lawyer, a patient older man named Mr. Harris, scheduled a meeting a couple of weeks after the funeral to go over the basics of the will. We all sat in a small, quiet conference room. There was a box of tissues on the table and a picture of a sailboat on the wall, like they were trying to make sadness look softer. He read through the will. The contents were straightforward, just like Dad. The modest savings, some retirement money, his truck, a few personal accounts, and the house. The house was the main asset. Mr. Harris explained that the house was left equally to the 3 of us, but with conditions. All decisions regarding sale, refinancing, or transfer had to be unanimously agreed upon, with all 3 signatures present. Exactly what Dad told me. Mark leaned back in his chair and nodded like this was all expected. Karen dabbed her eyes delicately, as if the whole thing was too painful for her to process, but I saw a flash in her expression when the house was mentioned. A quick, sharp interest. After the meeting, in the parking lot, Mark put his arm around my shoulders and squeezed. We will handle everything, he said. You are still emotional. Just focus on healing. We will make sure things are taken care of. I did not like the way he said, we, like it meant him and Karen as one team, and me as a fragile outsider. Still, I gave him the benefit of the doubt. Grief makes you want to believe the best in people. The first couple of months were quiet. I was still going to work, still coming by Dad's house on weekends to sort through things slowly. Mark and Karen had spare keys and came by now and then. Sometimes I would see them standing in the yard with other people, pointing at the house, walking around with their phones like they were taking pictures. When I asked, they always had some casual answer. Oh, that is just a friend of mine, he loves old houses, he wanted to see it. We were just thinking about what needs fixing if we decide to rent it out. There was always a reason. But the reason started to sound thin. Meanwhile, I started noticing other little things. Mail from the bank addressed to Estate of Robert Parker that never made it into Dad's mailbox, because Mark had apparently changed the mailing address to his own. Notices from the county about property. Tax assessments that I only found because a duplicate copy landed in my mailbox by mistake. When I asked Mark about it, he laughed it off. It is just easier if one of us handles everything, he said. You do not like paperwork, remember? He was right, I did not like paperwork. But I did not like being shut out even more. One afternoon, I was at Dad's house alone, sorting through old photo albums in the living room. A car pulled into the driveway. A man and a woman stepped out, both in dress clothes, holding a folder and a clipboard. They looked around the yard like they were inspecting something. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. "Can I help you?" I asked. They looked surprised to see me. The woman smiled politely. "Oh, we are just here to have a quick look for the appraisal." "Appraisal of what?" I asked. "The property," the man replied, a little confused now. "Your brother Mark said today was fine." I felt my stomach drop. I forced a tight smile and said, "Well, no one told me. This is still my father's estate. I would appreciate it if you did not go inside without all co-owners present." The woman shifted her weight uncomfortably. "I understand, ma'am, but we were hired to do a job. It will only take a few minutes." I stood a little straighter. "I am one of the heirs," I said clearly, "and I am telling you this is not happening today. You can reschedule when everyone is actually being honest about what is going on." They left, apologetic but firm about needing to talk to their client, Mark. I watched their car drive away with a knot in my chest. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. That evening I called Mark. "So," I began, "why is there an appraiser coming to Dad's house and why am I the last to know?" He sighed dramatically, like I was the one causing trouble. "Relax, Em. We are just exploring options. It is not a big deal." "Exploring options is one thing," I said, "scheduling an appraisal without telling me is another. We are supposed to make decisions together." Karen jumped into the call on speaker. "You are overreacting," she said. "We cannot sit on the house forever. Houses get old, things break, the market changes. If we wait too long, we could lose money." I did not care about the market. I cared about respect. When we are ready to talk about selling, we will talk about it. But until then, no more secret appraisals, no more quiet meetings with friends. I mean it. There was a pause. Then Mark said, with a tone I did not like, "You know, Dad would not want us to fight about this." "That is exactly why you should not be sneaking around," I replied, my voice tight. We hung up on cold terms. I tried to tell myself I had set a boundary. I tried to believe they would respect it. What I did not know then was that their plan was already in motion. They were simply adjusting it to go around me. Weeks turned into a couple of months. I kept waiting for updates from the lawyer about the estate, but the process felt strangely quiet. Whenever I called the office, the receptionist would tell me Mr. Harris was reviewing documents or waiting on signatures. I assumed it was routine. Legal work moves slowly, right? That is what we are always told. Then one Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Mr. Harris himself. His voice was formal. "Ms. Parker, I received your message about the status of the house. I am a bit surprised to hear your concern. I was under the impression everything had already been communicated." My heart started beating faster. "What do you mean, status of the house?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. There was a pause on his end, papers shuffling in the background. "The property was sold, Ms. Parker. The closing took place 2 weeks ago. Your brother and sister handled the signing. I was told all three of you were in agreement." For a moment, I literally could not speak. My mind went blank, like someone had turned off the lights. "I did not sign anything," I finally managed to say. "I have not agreed to anything. How could the house be sold without my signature, when the will clearly states all three of us must sign for a sale to be valid?" Another pause. This one longer. I could almost hear him rereading the file. "According to the documents," he said slowly, "your signature is present." My hands started to shake. "No," I whispered, "it is not. It cannot be. I never signed anything." He cleared his throat. Perhaps it would be best if you came into the office so we can review this together. I drove there in a kind of slow, burning shock. On the way, I replayed every recent conversation with Mark and Karen. The casual appraiser. The change of mailing address. The way they kept telling me I was too emotional to handle paperwork. Little pieces started snapping together into something ugly. At the office, Mr. Harris greeted me with a careful, almost cautious expression. He laid out the documents on the table. There it was. The sales agreement. The transfer of deed. And on the signature page, 3 names. Mark Parker. Karen Parker. And mine. Emily Parker, written in a handwriting that looked frighteningly similar to mine, but just wrong enough that my stomach flipped. I stared at it so long my eyes blurred. He pointed gently. You are saying this is not your signature? I am saying I did not sign this, I replied, my voice low but firm. That is not my hand. I never saw this document before today. I never agreed to this sale. His jaw tightened slightly. I see, he said. That is a serious allegation. It is not an allegation, I said, looking up at him with all the clarity I could hold on to. It is the truth. He exhaled slowly, then leaned back in his chair. Miss Parker, if what you are telling me is accurate, then there may be serious legal implications for how this sale was conducted. I will need to review everything and speak to the buyer's attorney and the bank that handled the funds. The bank, I repeated, the word echoing in my head. Yes, he said. The proceeds from the sale were wired into the estate account, the one I believe was opened jointly by your brother. From there, distributions were scheduled to be made to each of you. I had not seen a single dollar. No notices. No breakdown. Nothing. Do you have access to that account? He asked. I did not even know it was fully set up, I replied. He frowned and made a few notes. I am going to contact the bank. In the meantime, I need you to write a statement, in your own words, that you did not sign these documents and that you did not authorize anyone to sign on your behalf. I wrote it right there in his office, my hands steady now. The shock had shifted into something colder. Not just hurt, but a slow, deliberate anger. I remembered my father's voice in my head, the night he showed me those papers. Do not let anyone tell you your voice does not matter when I am gone. Not your brother. Not your sister. No one. When I left the lawyer's office, I did not go home right away. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, feeling the weight of what had just come to light. My own siblings had signed my name, used my identity, and sold the house our father had spent his life paying off. Without a conversation. Without a question. Without even the basic respect of informing me. That night, I drove to Mark's house. I did not call ahead. I did not warn them. I walked up to the door, rang the bell, and waited. When he opened the door and saw me, his face changed in an instant. He went from casual to guarded, like someone who suddenly realizes the secret is out. He said, this is a surprise. I stepped into the doorway but did not cross it. The house was sold, I said quietly. You forged my signature. His eyes flickered, just for a moment, then he rolled them like I was being dramatic. Oh, come on, Emily. Do not make this bigger than it is. We all knew the house needed to be sold. We are just moving things along. You always get stuck in your feelings. Karen appeared behind him, arms folded. You were dragging your feet, she said. We had to do something. We could not let the opportunity slip away. The market is good right now. We got a great price. You should be thanking us. Thanking you, I repeated slowly, tasting the bitterness of the words. You falsified my consent. You signed my name. You took my share without even talking to me. And you want me to say thank you? Mark stepped out onto the porch, closing the door behind him so the neighbors would not hear. His voice dropped lower, colder. You are overreacting, he said. The money is in the estate account. You will get your cut. Stop acting like a victim. Dad would not want you turning this into drama. That did it. My grief, my hurt, my anger, they all pulled together into one clear thought. Do not you dare use Dad to justify what you did, I said. He put protections in place so something like this could not happen. You walked right over his wishes, then lied about it. That is not moving things along. That is theft. He flinched at the word but tried to recover with a smirk. You would really call your own brother a thief? If the shoe fits, I said. Karen's face twisted with irritation. You know what, Emily, maybe you are not cut out for this. Money, property, legal stuff. It is clearly too much for you. Why do you not just let us handle it and you stay out of the way? There it was. The truth. They never saw me as an equal. They saw me as an obstacle. I took a slow breath. I have already spoken to Mr. Harris, I told them. He is contacting the bank. I also saw the documents. This is not going away quietly. For the first time, real fear flashed in their eyes. You talked to the bank? Mark asked. Not yet, I said. But they are next. He tried to bluff. You are not going to do that. You would not risk freezing the money over some technicality. I looked him straight in the eye. Watch me. I left them standing on their porch, their confident little world beginning to crack. At home that night, I did not sleep much. I kept thinking about Dad, about the way he would sit on that porch and look out over the yard as the sun went down. He trusted us to handle things fairly. He trusted us to behave like adults. And two of his children had turned that trust into an opportunity to grab more for themselves. The next day, while I was making coffee, my phone buzzed with a new email notification. I almost ignored it, thinking it was another bill or some random promotion. But the subject line made my heart skip. Important notice regarding estate account activity, it was from the bank. I opened it, my eyes scanning the first lines. Dear Ms. Parker, we are writing to inform you that unusual activity has been detected in the estate account. Associated with the late Robert Parker. Due to inconsistencies in the documentation provided, and in line with our fraud prevention protocols, certain restrictions may be placed on the account while we conduct a review. I stood there in my kitchen, the morning light coming through the window, my coffee growing cold on the counter, staring at those words. Unusual activity. Inconsistencies. Restrictions. A review. For the first time since this whole nightmare began, I felt something new, something that pushed back against the helplessness that had been sitting in my chest for weeks. I felt the shift. They thought they had gotten away with it. They thought I would cry a little, shout a little, then accept whatever crumbs they decided to toss my way. They thought I was weak. Emotional. Easy to dismiss. But the bank had seen something. The lawyer had questions. The paper trail they thought they had buried was starting to surface. I took a slow breath, the anger in me settling into something steady and focused. This was not the end of the story. Not even close. This, right here, was where things really started to turn. I read that email 3 times before my brain fully caught up with the words. Unusual activity. Inconsistencies. Restrictions. Review. I stood there in my small kitchen, with the cheap linoleum floor and the humming refrigerator, and felt something I had not felt in weeks. It was not relief, not yet. It was more like the first crack of light under a heavy door. Someone else finally saw what I saw. Someone else finally thought, wait a second, something is wrong here. I called the bank right away. After the usual identity questions, I got transferred to a man from the fraud department. His voice was calm, professional, the kind of voice that has heard every story in the book and is not easily surprised. Ms. Parker, thank you for calling in. We have flagged some things on the estate account for your late father, Robert Parker. I understand this may be a difficult time, but I would like to ask you a few questions. I am ready, I said, and I meant it. He asked when I had last signed any documents regarding the house. I told him the truth. I had never signed a single sale document. I told him about the will, the condition that all three of us had to sign. I told him about discovering a signature that was supposed to be mine, but was not. I told him about the appraiser at the house, the mail that had been redirected to my brother, the way I had been kept in the dark. He listened without interrupting, just the sound of his keyboard tapping softly in the background. "Thank you, Ms. Parker," he said when I finished. "Based on what you are describing, your concerns align with some of the irregularities we have noticed. For now, I am going to confirm that the estate account is under review. No funds will be allowed to leave that account until our investigation is complete. In addition, any connected transfers may also be restricted." "Connected transfers?" I asked. "Yes," he said. "Funds that were dispersed from the estate account into personal accounts, as well as any outstanding transactions tied to those funds. This is standard procedure when there is a question of possible fraud or misrepresentation." I let that sink in. "So," I asked slowly, "my brother and sister will not be able to use that money?" "Until the investigation is resolved," he said, "that is correct." I thanked him, got off the phone, and leaned against the wall. My heart was pounding, but not from fear this time. It was something else. Justice, just beginning to wake up. The next couple of days were strangely quiet. I went to work, smiled at my coworkers, answered emails. But my phone kept lighting up with messages from Mark and Karen. At first they were casual. "Hey, did you get some weird email from the bank? Call me when you can. There is some confusion with the estate account." I ignored them. I was done having conversations that went in circles. Then the tone shifted. "What did you say to them, Emily? The bank is messing things up. You need to fix this. You do not understand how finances work, you probably scared them for no reason." I still did not respond. Then came the angry ones. "This is our money too. You have no right to interfere. You always have to ruin everything, do you know that? If this sale falls through, it is on you." I sat on my couch one evening, reading those messages, and felt a strange calm settle over me. For years, I had been the peacekeeper, the one who backed down, the younger sister who let things slide for the sake of family harmony. But now their panicked texts were proof of something important. They were afraid. That meant their confidence had always been built on a foundation of, "She will not do anything." This time, I was doing something. A few days later, the bank investigator called again. He asked if I would be willing to come in person to sign a formal statement and review some account activity. I agreed. I took the day off from work, put on a simple navy blouse and black slacks, and drove to the branch main office, the one in the nicer part of town with the glass front and the wide lobby. Sitting across from him in a small conference room, with the account statement spread out between us, felt oddly like sitting in a courtroom, even though there was no judge yet. He pointed to a timeline of transactions. "The sale proceeds were wired into the estate account on the 12th, he explained. On the 13th and 14th, 3 transfers were initiated. One to an account in your name, which was never completed because of a documentation mismatch, and 2 to accounts owned by your siblings. Those 2 successfully went through, but our automated system flagged the pattern as unusual. That is what triggered the review." "Wait," I said, leaning in, "an account in my name?" He nodded and slid a page toward me. "Your brother submitted instructions for distribution and provided account information that he claimed belonged to you. However, some of the associated details did not match what we have on file for you." That raised a red flag. I stared at the numbers on the paper. It was not my account. It was some account I had never seen before, probably one they had opened using my name or just used Emily as a label to make it look legitimate. "So they tried to make it look like I had already gotten my share," I said quietly. "It appears so," he replied. But the system caught the inconsistency before the transfer completed. Those funds are still in the estate account. Your siblings' transfers, however, were successful before the freeze. My lips curled into a humorless smile. Of course they were. He looked at me carefully. I want you to know we take this seriously, Ms. Parker. When there is even a hint of forgery or misrepresentation, it affects not just the bank but also the validity of the transaction, and sometimes the legal liability of the parties involved. At this stage, our responsibility is to secure the assets while the attorneys and, if necessary, the courts determine the proper outcome. In plain English, I said, they thought they were slick, and now everything is stuck. He hesitated, then allowed himself a small nod. In plain English, yes, everything is stuck. When I left the bank, I checked my phone. 9 missed calls. 4 from Mark, 5 from Karen. 3 new voicemails from each of them. I did not listen to a single one. The first real explosion came that weekend. I was at home folding laundry when there was a loud knock on my door. Not a polite tap, a sharp, aggressive pounding. I already knew who it was before I opened it. Mark stood there on my porch, jaw clenched, eyes hard. Karen was a few steps behind him, arms folded tightly across her chest, lips pressed into a thin line. We need to talk, Mark said. I stepped outside and closed the door behind me. They did not get to walk into my space like they still owned a place in my life. You went to the bank, he said, skipping any kind of greeting. You told them some wild story and now all the accounts are frozen. Do you have any idea what you have done? Yes, I said quietly. I stopped you from stealing from me. You are welcome. His face flushed. This is not stealing. This is our inheritance. You are making a mess out of a simple situation. Simple? I repeated. You forged my signature. You tried to move my share into some random account and hoped no one would notice. You sold Dad's house behind my back. That is not simple. That is fraud. Karen jumped in, her voice trembling. Do you know our bills are bouncing now? The mortgage payment did not go through. Our card got declined at the grocery store. We have children, Emily. Real families. You are punishing all of us out of spite because you are too emotional to understand that this is just business. I let her finish. I watched the anger and fear roll off her in waves. Then I answered. You are not being punished because I am emotional, I said. You are facing consequences because you lied. The house was not just some asset on a spreadsheet. It was where Dad lived for 35 years. He made it very clear that none of us could sell it without all 3 signatures. You did it anyway, then faked mine. That is not just business. That is spitting on his wishes. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice like he was giving me some serious warning. Listen to me. You need to call that investigator and tell him you overreacted. You need to say it was a misunderstanding. If this goes to court, it is going to get ugly. They might even try to reverse the whole sale or drag the buyers into this. Do you want that on your conscience? For a brief second, I looked at him and saw the big brother I used to follow around the yard, the one who taught me how to ride a bike. And then I remembered that same boy grew into a man who now stood on my porch trying to manipulate me into helping him hide what he did. No, I said. I do not want anything on my conscience. That is why I am telling the truth. If the sale was done right, there would be nothing to worry about. The fact that you are this scared tells me everything I need to know. His jaw tightened. So that is it. You are choosing money over family. That line is so old it should be in a museum. I looked him dead in the eye. No, Mark. I am choosing integrity over theft. I am choosing Dad's wishes over your shortcuts. And I am choosing myself over being the quiet little sister you can walk all over. Those days are done. He stared at me like he did not recognize me anymore. Good, I thought. Maybe for the first time, he was seeing the real me, not the version he had built in his head. Karen's eyes filled with tears. "You are going to regret this," she said. "When all of this is over, you are going to realize you blew up our family for nothing." I shook my head. "I did not blow anything up. You lit the match the day you decided. My consent did not matter. I am just not covering the fire for you." They left in a blur of angry footsteps and muttered words. As their car pulled away, I felt the weight of what had just happened. There are some arguments you can come back from as a family. This did not feel like one of them. The next few weeks felt like watching a slow-motion landslide. It started with little stories trickling back to me through mutual friends and small-town gossip, because people always talk. Someone mentioned seeing Karen at the bank looking pale and tight-lipped. Another said Mark had been on the phone outside his office yelling about incompetent bankers and overreach. There were whispers that one of his business deals had fallen through because his funds were inaccessible. One friend told me Karen had asked to borrow money just until this bank mess clears up, something she almost never did openly. Meanwhile, I kept getting quiet, polite calls from professionals. The bank investigator. Mr. Harris the lawyer. A representative from the buyer's attorney. Each one asking for my version of events, for documentation, for copies of messages. I gave them everything. Screenshots of texts from Mark and Karen. A note from Dad mentioning the will and the conditions. Dates and times of conversations. I laid it all out. One evening, as I was sitting on the couch reading, Mr. Harris called. His voice was more direct than usual. "Ms. Parker, I wanted to update you. The buyers of your father's house have retained their own counsel. It appears they were not informed that your consent was missing. Their attorney has raised concerns about the validity of the sale. This complicates matters for your siblings significantly." I closed my book and set it down. "What does that mean, exactly?" "It means," he said, "that if the court finds that your signature was forged and the conditions of the will were violated, the sale could be declared void or subject to financial penalties. Your siblings may be held personally liable for any losses the buyers suffer. There may also be restitution and sanctions. From what I am seeing, the judge is not likely to look kindly on this." A part of me winced at the word penalties. These were still the kids who grew up in the same house I did. But another part of me, the part that had sat in that kitchen clutching that email from the bank, felt something like quiet satisfaction. "And my share?" I asked. "At this point," he said, "your share is intact. The funds in dispute have not been disbursed. Your position is significantly stronger because you raised the issue immediately and have been cooperative with the investigation." After we hung up, I sat there for a long time. I thought about Dad, about how he used to say that life has a way of balancing the scales, even if it takes time. I also thought about how sometimes that balancing act looks brutal from the outside. The true breaking point for my siblings came a couple of weeks later. I was at the grocery store one Saturday morning, pushing my cart past the canned soup, when I saw Karen at the customer service desk. Her hair was hastily pulled back, no makeup, the kind of tired that comes from deep stress, not just a bad night's sleep. She was talking in a low voice to the clerk, holding a little booklet of checks. I could not hear every word, but I heard enough. "I do not understand," she said. "There has to be some mistake. This account was fine last month. We have never had an overdraft before." The clerk's voice was apologetic. "I am sorry, ma'am, the system shows the account is restricted. I cannot override it from here. You will have to speak to the bank directly." "I have tried," she said, and for a moment her voice cracked. "They keep saying ongoing investigation, but we have bills. We have kids. We cannot just live on nothing while they look into it." I watched her from the end of the aisle, my hand resting on the cart handle. I did not step forward. I did not gloat. But I also did not feel guilty, not the way the old me might have. Actions have consequences. She had gambled on the assumption that I would remain small and quiet. She lost. I turned my cart and walked toward the checkout, my own groceries paid for with money I had earned honestly, not taken from someone else's share. A few days later, I got another call, this time from a number I did not recognize. It turned out to be an assistant from the county court. "Ms. Emily Parker?" she asked. "Yes. You are scheduled to appear as a key party in an upcoming probate hearing regarding the estate of Robert Parker. Your presence is required, and you may be asked to provide testimony regarding the disposition of the estate assets." There it was. The word I had known was coming. Court. As the date approached, I felt a mix of nerves and clarity. I was not someone who enjoyed conflict. I was the one who used to avoid it. But this was not about winning an argument at the dinner table. This was about standing in a place where the truth actually mattered, where documents and timelines and signatures would be examined by someone who did not care about who cried louder or who had the better guilt trips. The morning of the hearing, I dressed simply but neatly. Black slacks again, a soft cream blouse, Dad's old watch on my wrist. Not because it was valuable, it was not. But because it felt like a small way of taking him with me into that room. When I walked into the courthouse, the air smelled like old paper and cleaner. Marble floors, metal detectors, a few benches with people waiting, some looking nervous, some bored. I found the right courtroom and stepped inside. Mark and Karen were already there, sitting at the same table, whispering furiously. Their attorney, a man in a crisp gray suit, was flipping through a folder, barely glancing at me. Their eyes met mine for a second. Karen quickly looked away. Mark held the stare a moment longer, something defiant and desperate in his expression, then turned back to his lawyer. My lawyer, Mr. Harris, gave me a small nod from our side of the room. "You will be fine," he murmured. "Just tell the truth. The documents speak loudly." When the judge walked in, everyone rose. She was a woman in her 60s with sharp eyes and an expression that said she had heard every excuse under the sun and was not impressed by many of them. We sat down, and the proceedings began. I will not drag you through every legal word that was said, but I will tell you this. There is a particular kind of silence that falls in a courtroom when a forgery is put up on a large screen for everyone to see, and the person whose name was forged says clearly, "That is not my signature." There is a particular kind of tension when bank records are shown, highlighting the way funds flowed into some accounts and bounced off others, and words like misrepresentation and breach of fiduciary duty start getting thrown around. And there is a particular kind of stillness when a judge leans forward, looks over her glasses at the people sitting at the table, and says, "Explain to me again why you thought you could sign your sister's name on a binding legal document." I felt every second of that stillness. I will tell you the details of what the judge said, and what sentence she handed down, and how exactly the bank froze and reshaped their financial lives. But that, as my dad would say, is the next chapter. Because what happened after that hearing was not just about money. It was about reputation, about trust, about the slow, methodical way that their choices came back to stand in front of them like a mirror they could not look away from. And it was, whether they liked it or not, the beginning of their real punishment. I sat there in that courtroom, listening to the shuffle of papers and the clack of the clerk's keyboard, feeling the weight of something huge hanging in the air. It was not just a legal hearing anymore. It felt like the moment right before a storm breaks, where the clouds are swollen and heavy and everyone knows what is coming but no one says it out loud. My heart was steady, not racing, just steady, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I belonged in the room where decisions were being made. The judge adjusted her glasses and looked down at the documents again. Her voice was calm, but there was an edge to it when she finally spoke. "Ms. Parker," she said, turning her attention to me, "you are stating, under oath, that you never signed this document authorizing the sale of your father's house. Correct?" "That is correct, Your Honor," I said, my voice clear. "And you had no knowledge of the sale?" "No knowledge at all." She nodded and shifted her gaze to my siblings. Mark straightened in his seat like he was preparing to give a speech. Karen stared at the table, gripping a tissue. so tightly it was tearing between her fingers. "Mr. Parker," the judge said, "do you wish to explain how your sister's signature appeared on these documents?" Mark's attorney stepped in before he could open his mouth. "Your Honor, we believe this is a misunderstanding. My clients acted in good faith and, in good faith," the judge interrupted, tilting her head slightly. "Forging a signature on a property sale is not a misunderstanding, counsel. It is fraud." The lawyer hesitated. His lips parted like he wanted to try again, then closed. He looked at Mark with a silent message that said, "Stop talking." The judge continued. "These documents present a serious concern. And the court takes allegations of forgery very seriously, especially when connected to the administration of an estate." Karen finally spoke. Her voice was small. "We didn't mean harm. We thought it would be easier if we made the decision quickly. The house was too much work, and Emily was still grieving. She wasn't in a place to make big decisions." The judge pressed her lips together. "So you made the decisions for her?" she asked. "Despite the will requiring all signatures?" Karen swallowed. "We thought she would be okay with it. She," the judge said, pointing gently in my direction, "is sitting right here telling us she was not okay with it." The room fell quiet. My sibling's attorney shifted uncomfortably, flipping through his papers even though he already knew what was in them. Mr. Harris, on my side, looked calm, observant, composed. The contrast between the two sides felt like night and day. Then the judge addressed the bank statements. "Next," she said, "we need to discuss the movement of funds. The estate account received the proceeds of the property sale. From there, distributions were attempted. One transfer was flagged and frozen due to mismatched identity information. 2 others," she said, glancing at my siblings, "were made to your personal accounts." Karen started crying silently. Mark clenched his jaw. "This court needs to understand whether these transfers were authorized," the judge continued, "and whether they were conducted in violation of the will and without the consent of all beneficiaries." She leaned back for a moment, considering everything. Then she spoke with a clarity that filled the room. "Based on the evidence presented, I am prepared to make several preliminary findings." My breath caught in my chest. "First," she said, "the court finds that the sale of the property was conducted without full and lawful consent. The forgery of Ms. Emily Parker's signature invalidates the sale agreement. The buyers acted in good faith, and therefore they are entitled to full protection and may pursue damages from the responsible parties." Mark's lawyer stiffened. Karen's shoulders shook harder. "Second," the judge continued, "the estate funds that were transferred into personal accounts are to be returned immediately to the estate account. Until that occurs, those funds are legally frozen. Third, the court authorizes the estate attorney and the bank to restrict access to all related accounts until further notice." I felt the weight of every word. The judge wasn't just giving guidelines. She was laying down the path that would lead to everything my siblings had done coming back to them with full force. But then came the part that made my heart stop completely. "Fourth," the judge said, turning her eyes directly to Mark and Karen, "because the court has found substantial evidence of misconduct in the handling of the estate, both Mr. Mark Parker and Ms. Karen Parker will be held accountable for the legal consequences of violating probate law, including but not limited to restitution, penalties, and potential civil liability." Karen let out a soft gasp, like the air had been punched out of her. Mark stared straight ahead, face blank, like he had turned to stone. And finally, the judge said, "Given Ms. Emily Parker's cooperation, clarity, and immediate reporting of the discrepancies, she is confirmed as the only compliant party in the administration of this estate. Her interests will be protected accordingly." For a second, I thought I misheard her. I blinked. Mr. Harris gave me a small nod. My siblings looked at me as if they were seeing me for the first time in their lives. The judge gathered her papers. "We will reconvene in 3 weeks to finalize the division of assets and address outstanding penalties. Until then, all parties are instructed to comply fully with the investigation." She stood. Court is adjourned. The gavel fell. And my world shifted. As people began filing out of the room, my siblings remained seated, looking stunned, pale, broken in a way I had never seen. Their attorney whispered something that made Karen cover her mouth, like she might throw up. Mark rubbed his forehead with both hands. I stood up slowly, feeling steady, grounded. Dad's watch on my wrist felt heavier than before, like it carried the weight of everything he had warned me about. His words echoed in my head. Do not let anyone treat you like you are replaceable. I had not. Not this time. On my way out of the courtroom, I did not look back. I did not need to. Their silence told me everything. Over the next 3 weeks, the fallout grew louder. The buyers filed a formal complaint, which meant my siblings were now dealing with the possibility of being sued. Their bank accounts remained frozen. Their credit lines were blocked. Late fees piled up. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Mark's business partner pulled out of a deal because his financial instability made him too risky. Karen's husband was furious, saying he had no idea she had been involved in anything illegal. Their kids' school tuition payment bounced. Their mortgages were at risk. Consequences had finally caught up. When the final hearing day arrived, the courtroom felt different. Tighter. More serious. The judge reviewed the final findings with clear, controlled authority. The sale was invalidated. The buyers were refunded in full. My siblings were held financially responsible for all penalties. Their shares of the estate were reduced significantly to cover restitution. My share, untouched and legally protected, was released to me in full. The judge ended with a quiet, cold sentence that hung in the air long after she said it. You cannot take what you did not earn. And you cannot erase someone's rights just because they are grieving. When I stepped out of the courthouse for the last time, the sun felt warm on my face. The kind of warm that feels like restoration, not just weather. I took a long breath, let it out slowly, and felt something settle inside me. Justice was not loud. It was not dramatic. It was patient. And when it arrived, it was complete. My siblings never apologized. Not once. Not publicly, not privately. But they did stop contacting me. They had nothing left to say. As for me, I used my share wisely. I put most of it into savings. I fixed up my apartment. I took time to breathe again. To grieve Dad properly. To sit on my porch with his watch on my wrist and feel like I had honored him. Because in the end, this was never about revenge in the way movies show it. It was about reclaiming what was mine. It was about telling the truth when everyone expected me to stay quiet. It was about letting life balance the scales, just like Dad always said it would. And if you are listening to me right now, and you have been betrayed by the people you trusted most, I want you to remember this. You do not have to shout. You do not have to pick up a sword. You just have to stand firm. The truth will do the rest. Thank you for listening to my story. If you want more real family revenge stories like this one, make sure you subscribe and stay with me. Your support helps me keep sharing these true stories with you.